What makes this voiceover film-ruiningly bad?
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession.
While this,
as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster,
is one of cinema's most iconic openings.
To begin, how to start.
In Adaptation, written by Charlie Kaufman, a fictional version of Kaufman is attempting to write the screenplay for the very movie we're watching. After battling writer's block for most of the film and making very little progress, Charlie finds himself at a screenwriting seminar.
I'll start over. I need to face this project head on.
And God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you.
This advice, given by a fictional version of Robert McKee, the real author of one of the most renowned screenwriting books of all time,
Any idiot can write voiceover narration,
is not that much of an exaggeration of the slightly more nuanced advice he gives in his book, where he still calls voiceover narration an indolent practice and says the trend threatens the future of our art.
It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
There are plenty of reasons to be skeptical of voiceover.
And family photos? Replicants didn't have families either.
Film is a largely visual medium, and voiceover can be used as a crutch to deliver clunky exposition or reveal a character's innermost landscape.
I see myself from the outside.
Instead of doing the difficult task of figuring out how to reveal those things through a character's actions, or trusting the audience to pick up on the subtext that's on screen. Lazy voiceover can be one of the most cringe-inducing forms of bad writing there is in movies.
Sushi. That's what my ex-wife called me.
So I get why the advice to never use voiceover has become so common and why so many people say they hate it, but threatens the future of our art? I find it a little bit ridiculous because
I am unconcerned. I am beyond their timid, lying morality.
some of the best movies of all time use voiceover.
To me, it meant being somebody in a neighborhood that was full of nobodies.
Some of my favorite film screenplays use voiceover.
On a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0.
And I believe it can be used artfully to help tell a story just like any other tool at a filmmaker's disposal. But what separates the truly terrible from the great? There's an extended cut of this video with some longer examples available on Nebula. If you want to watch that version, click the link in the description below. As McKee points out, bad voiceover is redundant, lazy, and overly expositional.
Whatever was in the bathtub was not human. Replicants don't have scales.
But then you have this.
You're only on this earth once. And to my opinion, as long as you're around, you should have it nice.
When we talk about iconic voiceover, Terrence Malick's second film, Days of Heaven, is one of the first movies that springs to my mind. It's hard to put a finger on exactly why Linda Mann's childish, poetic ramblings work so well throughout the film.
I met this guy named Ding Dong. He told me the whole earth is going up in flames.
But maybe the magic is in its authenticity, because it is, in effect, childish, poetic ramblings. John Bleasdale recounts the story of how this bit of voiceover came about in his biography of Malick. Apparently, Malick wanted Mans to read the voiceover he had scripted, but at the recording session, she was much more interested in simply retelling a Bible story she'd overheard where she was staying.
There's gonna be creatures running every which way. Some of them burned, half their wings burning. People are gonna be screaming and hollering for help.
Malick ended up loving her off-the-cuff storytelling so much they basically just played the whole movie for her and let her riff over top.
He was tired of living like the rest of them, nosing around like a pig in a gutter.
And then took bits of voiceover they liked and painstakingly painted them throughout the film wherever they worked, sometimes playing a single line on loop through the entire movie to find the perfect fit.
He figured some people need more than they got, other people got more than they need. Just a matter of getting us all together.
What makes this voiceover work so well is that it's not just being treated as a way to convey information or exposition. Instead, Malick applies the same artistic process of discovery to the voiceover that he uses for every other part of the films. And he allows Linda Mann's offbeat ramblings to shape the tone and texture of the movie, which toes a line between innocence and something more foreboding, even in its imagery. This kind of vague poetic connection between the voiceover and the plot wouldn't work for every movie, but what's most important here is that this approach to the voiceover complements the overall feeling and style of the movie. And this is one of the biggest things that I think sets great voiceover apart from the bad. Voiceover has a unique power to set the tone of a film.
Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy.
Whether it's the stumbling first lines of The Big Lebowski.
Wow. Lost my train of thought here. But, hell. I done introduced him enough.
The stoned haziness of Joanna Newsom's voiceover for Inherent Vice.
Does it ever end? Of course it does. It did.
Or the austere, detached, almost history documentary style of Michael Hordern's narration for Barry Lyndon.
The United Kingdom was in a state of great excitement from the threat, generally accredited, of a French invasion.
Whoever's performing the voiceover essentially becomes the voice of the movie, and the qualities of that actor's specific voice, along with the emotional tenor of the performance, has a huge influence on how the overall film ends up feeling. If the reading of the voiceover feels dry, lifeless, or forced in any way, the movie itself ends up feeling lifeless as well. So it's a tool that must be used with care. But when it works, it can be magical.
He installed himself in a rocking chair and smoked a cigar down in the evenings as his wife wiped her pink hands on an apron and reported happily on their 2 children.
It's the specific blend of voiceover, imagery, and score that really lingers in my mind when I think back on the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
They didn't even know their father's name.
Like with Days of Heaven, this voiceover also came about as the result of a happy accident. I'd always wondered who this voiceover was. It's not a recognizable actor, but it has such a unique quality. And while flipping through Roger Deakins' new book, I was delighted to learn it's actually one of the film's editors. Hugh Ross had recorded himself reading the voiceover as a temporary placeholder to edit to, and director Andrew Dominic ended up loving his reading so much that they kept it for the final film. Voiceover inherently breaks the film away from strict realism. That's only bad if you think realism is somehow inherently the best stylistic approach to filmmaking. If the formal narrative presentation of the film is more theatrical or stylized in some way, then voiceover can be a very effective tool. I find the best uses of voiceover lean into what makes narrated stories interesting. There are a couple ways you can do this. Sometimes, like in the Royal Tenenbaums, the voiceover is presented as if it is the literal reading of a book.
Royal Tenenbaum bought the house on Archer Avenue in the winter of his 35th year.
Which is maybe not that interesting if the movie is actually a book, but it adds a layer of meta irony and creates an interesting framing device for the film when that book is fictional.
No one in his family had spoken to him in 3 years.
When what has felt like an omniscient narrator shows up halfway through The Big Lebowski.
You got a good sarsaparilla?
Sioux City sarsaparilla?
Yeah, it's a good one.
We almost get the sense that the dude is coming into contact with God himself. In Sunset Boulevard, the narrator is dead, somehow speaking to us from the great beyond. And in Double Indemnity...
Yes, I remembered. Just like I remembered what you had told me, Keys.
The voiceover takes the form of a confession.
How there was no getting off till the end of the line, where the cemetery was.
Or the narration can lean into a more deliberately literary quality, making use of interesting language.
But once he perceived that he would never see Jesse again, Frank would be wrought up, perplexed, despondent.
Sure, film might be a visual medium, but when you use narration, you suddenly have the entire world of artistic and stylistic possibility that literary writing provides.
But what does a doctor avail in a contest with the grim, invincible enemy?
Everything that can give language in a book an interesting style can now be applied to the voiceover. Whatever the approach, most great voiceover feels a little inherently theatrical. The characters may not speak naturally, but they aren't just robotically reading the details of the plot. They're telling a tale, performing a story for the audience. The more casual ramblings of Linda in Days of Heaven leaves you feeling like you might be one of the workers sitting across the fire from her after a day of working in the fields.
You figured there must be something wrong with them, the way they always got no luck.
The same goes for Newsom's narration in Inherent Vice, where it feels like we might be listening to her spin a yarn at the very restaurant the character appears at in the film.
Man, oh man, never ever be surprised at the levels of disrespect within the LAPD.
You might be noticing that much of what makes great voiceover is similar to what makes good writing or good performance. And as with both, it's best to show instead of tell. Wait, how can voiceover be used to show? Isn't it inherently telling?
To me, being a gangster was better than being president of the United States.
Goodfellas leans heavily on voiceover from the main character, Henry Hill.
In the summer when they played cards all night, nobody ever called the cops.
The film is essentially framed as a story we're being told by Henry himself, and the voiceover is lyrical, inventively written, and helps us understand the world of the mobsters. But if it was just that, I don't think it would work that well. What really brings the voiceover in Goodfellas to life is not what Henry is telling us, it's what the way he tells the story is showing us.
At 13, I was making more money than most of the grown-ups in the neighborhood. I mean, I had more money than I could spend. I had it all.
The advice to show rather than tell originally comes from literature, but when it's applied to film, it's easy to think it means literally using images on the screen to show something rather than using words. But I think that's the wrong way to interpret the advice. Instead, show don't tell isn't trying to drive us away from using words, it's guiding us away from simply stating or explaining what's going on with a character, a major theme, or a development in the plot with those words.
Replicants weren't supposed to have feelings. Neither were Blade Runners. What the hell was happening to me?
Instead, what's usually more engaging for the audience is to reveal important details and character revelations in the subtext of what's being said, essentially allowing us to read between the lines. And the voiceover in Goodfellas is incredibly rich with subtext. Towards the end of the film, Henry speaks directly to us, the audience, from the witness stand. And there's a way in which this recasts the entire film as a confession. All of that stands in interesting contrast to the almost loving, nostalgic way Henry describes his life as a gangster.
And when the cops, they assigned a whole army to stop Jimmy, what did he do?
How you doing, Joe?
He made them partners.
Okay.
If this is really Henry reflecting back on this life, we can understand through the way he romanticizes the world of the mob while glossing over many of the more horrific details that we see, that he hasn't really learned a lesson at all. He isn't actually repenting of any wrongdoing.
That's when I knew I would never have come back from Florida alive.
He's just using this confession to escape consequences while he continues to see himself as better than those outside the life. That use of voiceover is also an example of voiceover as counterpoint, which is one of the few acceptable uses that McKee mentions. If redundant voiceover, which just restates what you're already seeing or what is obvious to the viewer, is the ultimate sin, then it makes sense that voiceover, which does the opposite of that by providing contrasting information or tone, is one of the ways you can make voiceover more effective.
He claimed that as long as you're playing for keeps and the law's coming at you, it's considered okay to shoot all witnesses. You had to take the consequences, though, and not whine about it later.
Here's an example from Eric Romaire's movie Love in the Afternoon.
Puis, l'humeur de Chloé s'assombrit. Ses ressources tirent à leur fin.
A story about a married man for whom the worst problem in his life is just how many beautiful women there are in Paris. Through the film, he occasionally narrates what he's feeling or thinking as the story progresses.
Elle se comportait exactement envers moi, comme envers un amant bafoué.
Which wouldn't really add that much, except that Romaire uses this to illustrate the way this character is creating a false internal narrative to justify his own actions. As he starts letting himself slip into an affair with an old ex who shows up at his work, through the voiceover, the character paints himself as interacting with her very reluctantly and even fearfully. But the attentive viewer will notice that this is total BS.
Je retrouvais mon ancienne crainte de voir Chloé abuser, même innocemment, des droits que lui donnait ma complaisance.
As viewers, we're seeing one thing play out in the character on screen, but the voiceover provides an ironic counterpoint to what we're seeing, trapping us inside the character's own self-deluding narrative.
Sentant qu'elle avait besoin de réconfort, je l'invitais à déjeuner dans un restaurant des boulevards.
Finally, voiceover has to be treated as one of the instruments in the orchestra. It has to harmonize with everything else. Part of what makes the voiceover from the opening of Goodfellas or this opening segment from Sentimental Value work so well.
Hun lurte på om huset likte best å være lett og tomt, eller fullt og tomt. Om gulvplankene likte å bli tråkket på. Om det kilte I veggene. Gjorde det noen ganger vondt?
Is the way the rhythm and flow of the narration, the language of the script, the music and editing are all seamlessly working together to create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Great voiceover doesn't need all of the attributes we've talked about, but if you examine bad voiceover, you'll usually notice it's missing most of them. The actual writing of the voiceover is uninventive, the performance might feel forced, or doesn't have a sense of motivation or perspective, or has a tone that clashes with the rest of the film. The narrative frame of where the voiceover is coming from is either uninteresting or unclear, or the flow of images and voiceover together simply isn't satisfying. Voiceover is hard to get right, but that doesn't mean it's bad. If anything, the advice should be, it's a very powerful storytelling device, so use it wisely. If you're not sure if it's working, it might be better to just leave it out. But done well, it's just another way to do what movies do best: tell a story. A lot of what I've learned about filmmaking and the research I do for these videos comes from the film books that I read. If you want to see an in-depth tour of many of my favorite books on my bookshelf, I made a 2-part series where I break down my recommendations and what I took away from each book. You can watch these videos exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming service created by creators like myself, and there's a lot of great things you'll get when you sign up. In addition to exclusive videos I've made, like my bookshelves tour, you can also see all of my videos early and without any ads or sponsor reads. It's not just my videos, you'll find an extensive library of other creators on there, including other great video essayists like Broy Deschanel, Like Stories of Old, Cinemasticks, or Patrick Willems. Myself and many of these creators have exclusive videos and content on Nebula that you can't see anywhere else, and Nebula is constantly putting out new, incredible originals that I think you'll enjoy, including my favorite travel game show, Jetlag, and Patrick H. Willems' wonderful new short film, The Dinner Plan. Nebula is super affordable. If you visit go.nebula.tv/ThomasFlight, you'll get 50% off the annual plan, making it just $2.50 a month or $30 a year. There's, of course, a link in the description below. You can click or use the QR code on the screen. Go check out Nebula, sign up, browse the exclusive videos I have available, along with all the other great original content on the platform. Thanks so much to those who have signed up and watch on Nebula. Watching on there goes a long way to support my work and the work of other incredible creators. And thanks to Nebula for sponsoring this video. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/ThomasFlight to get 50% off today.